Imagine a world where your every breath, every action, and every thought are controlled by the unyielding chains of slavery. Now, picture the breaking point, the moment when a single man, driven by unspeakable horrors, ignites a rebellion that shakes the very foundation of an entire region. Nat Turner, the most feared slave in Virginia, became that man. In just 48 hours, he killed 55 people, leaving a trail of terror that would haunt the South for generations. What drove this seemingly ordinary man to take such a drastic stand? And what does his legacy mean today? If you're intrigued by Nat Turner's story and want to learn more about this dark chapter of history, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with your friends. You won't want to miss what comes next. Nat Turner's story begins in the heart of the South, where the weight of slavery shaped every aspect of life. Born on October 2nd, 1800, in Southampton County, Virginia, Turner entered the world at a time when enslaved people were considered property, not humans. But what set Turner apart from the others wasn't just his birthplace, it was the fire inside him. Turner was born to an enslaved woman, Nancy, and though he came from a lineage of enslaved people, there was something extraordinary about him. As a young boy, he was highly intelligent, capable of learning quickly, so much so that he could read the Bible before he was even a teenager. His passion for reading and his deep understanding of Christian teachings would later play a key role in his rebellion. From an early age, Turner was known for his spiritual beliefs. He claimed to have visions from God, and these weren't just fleeting dreams, they were vivid, detailed, and deeply influential. By the time he was a young man, these visions began to take on greater significance. Turner believed that God had a special purpose for him to end the scourge of slavery in America, but even as his faith grew, so did the reality of the brutal system of slavery around him. Turner witnessed the unspeakable horrors of enslaved life, the constant violence, the family separations, and the dehumanization. These experiences, coupled with his visions, pushed him toward the ultimate decision to lead a revolt that would forever change the South. But what made Turner's choice even more startling was that he wasn't driven solely by anger, he was guided by something deeper. His faith, his belief in destiny, and his unwavering conviction in the righteousness of his cause made him a force to be reckoned with. To understand why Nat Turner's rebellion was so monumental, we need to look at the world he was fighting against. Virginia, in the early 1800s, was a heartland of the American slave economy. Enslaved people made up a huge portion of the population, more than 40% in some areas, working the vast tobacco plantations that dotted the landscape. It was a system built on oppression, violence, and fear. The brutality of slavery in Virginia wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Enslaved people were subjected to grueling labor, often from dawn till dusk, with little to no rest. They were punished for the smallest infractions, their families torn apart, and their very existence reduced to a commodity. The enslaved were treated as property, not people, and their suffering was constant. It wasn't just the work, it was the complete control over their lives. The white population, though smaller in number, maintained control through violence and fear. Slave owners and overseers used punishment as a tool of dominance, keeping enslaved people in line through brutal whippings, public executions, and psychological terror. It was a system designed to break the spirit of anyone who tried to resist or escape. But amidst this oppression, Nat Turner began to see a way out. He wasn't the only one to dream of freedom, but his vision was different. Where many believed in escape or running, Turner saw something more direct, a rebellion, a way to take back what had been stolen from his people. He wasn't acting on anger alone, he was acting on the belief that his visions, combined with the brutal reality around him, meant it was time for action. Turner would not wait for freedom to come. He would seize it. Are you ready to see the spark that ignited the rebellion? Nat Turner's vision wasn't just a fleeting thought or a vague desire, it was a divine calling. As a young man, Turner began experiencing vivid, intense visions that he believed were messages from God. These weren't just dreams or hallucinations. They were deeply spiritual experiences that shaped the course of his life. Turner described these visions as being so powerful that they felt like direct communication from the heavens. In one of his earliest visions, Turner saw a black man leading a revolution, and this figure told him that his time would come to rise up and overthrow the system of slavery. But these visions didn't stop there. As he continued to experience these spiritual revelations, Turner became convinced that he was destined for something greater, a leader chosen by God to free his people. He believed that it was his role to lead a rebellion that would cleanse the land of slavery, and he saw himself as the instrument of God's will. Turner's visions became increasingly specific, and he interpreted them as signs that the time was right. One of his most powerful visions came to him in the summer of 1831, where he saw a solar eclipse. To him, this eclipse was a celestial signal, a sign that the moment for action had finally arrived. It was time to act, to fulfill what he believed was his divine purpose. As Turner's belief in his mission grew, so did his sense of urgency. The visions fueled his determination and gave him the courage to act. He wasn't just fighting for his own freedom, he was fighting for the freedom of everyone enslaved in the South. And as his vision promised, he would lead the way, ready to see how Nat Turner took that divine message and turned it into a full-blown revolt. In the summer of 1831, Nat Turner knew the time had come. He had received the signs, the visions, and the confirmation he needed. His mind was set, and his plan was already taking shape. He wasn't acting alone. Turner gathered a group of trusted fellow enslaved people, men who shared his deep belief in the rebellion and his dream of freedom. Together, they prepared for a strike that would send shockwaves throughout Virginia and beyond. It was on the night of August 21st, 1831, that Turner's rebellion began. The group set out under the cover of darkness, moving stealthily through the back roads of Southampton County. They didn't strike in a single place, they spread out, attacking several plantations in a carefully coordinated effort to weaken the system from within. Turner and his followers started with a brutal attack on the home of their first victim, a plantation owner named Joseph Travis. They killed him, his wife, and his child, setting off a chain reaction that would grow larger and more deadly as the hours passed. Turner's group quickly gained strength. As word spread of their uprising, more enslaved people joined the cause, eager to take action. The group's numbers swelled as they moved from plantation to plantation, killing not only slave owners but also their families. Within the first 24 hours, Turner and his followers had killed more than 50 people. What made this revolt so terrifying wasn't just the speed of the attacks, it was the very idea that enslaved people were rising up against the power structure that had held them captive for so long. The shock and horror it caused among white Virginians was palpable. They had never seen anything like it. As the rebellion grew, so did the fear. But could Turner's revolution succeed, or was it doomed from the start? What unfolded over the next 48 hours was pure chaos. As the night turned into morning, Turner and his followers surged forward, unstoppable in their path. They didn't just kill, they left a message in their wake. The fear was palpable, spreading quickly among white families in Southampton County. Turner's group was ruthlessly efficient, attacking without mercy. No one was safe. Men, women, children, everyone connected to the system of slavery became a target. The rebellion moved fast, with Turner at the helm, leading his followers from one plantation to the next. By the time the sun rose on August 22nd, the death toll was rising, and the atmosphere was charged with panic. Some accounts claim that the rebels moved with a sense of righteousness, knowing their cause was just, while others say it was sheer rage that propelled them forward. In the midst of the bloodshed, the rebels' action sent shockwaves through the South. As more and more enslaved people joined the revolt, the terror intensified. Many white Virginians fled their homes, seeking refuge in nearby cities, as word of the rebellion spread like wildfire. But while the rebels were in control, they were far from invincible. News of the uprising reached local militias and armed groups of white citizens, who quickly mobilized to suppress the rebellion. By the end of the second day, the momentum was beginning to shift. The well-armed militias arrived, bringing with them overwhelming force. The rebels were outnumbered, and their chances of success were rapidly slipping away. But in those 48 hours, they had struck fear into the heart of the South. They had proven that the enslaved could rise, and that was a terrifying thought for the ruling class. What happened when the rebellion was crushed? And what were the consequences for Turner and his followers? The brutal reality of Turner's rebellion set in as the rebellion faltered, but the consequences were just beginning. By August 23, 1831, after 2 days of terror, local militias and angry mobs had quashed the uprising. Turner's forces, initially empowered by the righteousness of their cause, were quickly overwhelmed. With their numbers shrinking and facing armed opposition, many rebels were captured, executed, or forced to flee. The immediate aftermath was devastating. For the enslaved people who had joined the rebellion, there was no mercy. The South would not allow a revolt like this to go unpunished. Local white authorities launched a brutal wave of retaliation, with many enslaved men, women, and even children being killed in an effort to crush any remaining spirit of defiance. As many as 200 African Americans were killed in the aftermath, though only a small fraction of them had participated in the uprising. This was no longer about justice, it was about making an example of the rebellion. The message was clear. Resistance would be met with the full force of white supremacy, but for Nat Turner, the fear was just beginning. The hunt for the rebel leader intensified. Turner had managed to evade capture in the early days after the revolt, hiding in the swamps and forests, but it was only a matter of time before the authorities found him. They offered large rewards for information leading to his capture, and it didn't take long for someone to betray him. On October 30th, 1831, Turner was found hiding in a small pit in the woods. His capture marked the end of the rebellion, but the consequences would be far-reaching. Far beyond just one man, the authorities made sure that Turner's trial and execution would send a clear, terrifying message to anyone who might think of following his example. Are you ready to find out how the trial unfolded and what happened when Turner was brought to justice? After Nat Turner's rebellion was crushed, the South's worst fear came to life. A leader had risen from within the enslaved community. The hunt for Turner became one of the most intense manhunts in American history. Turner wasn't just a fugitive, he was a symbol of defiance, of resistance to the system that had oppressed millions for centuries. His capture became a matter of pride and fear for the white elite, and they would stop at nothing to bring him to justice. Turner's escape didn't last long. He hid in the dense woods of Southampton County, eluding search parties that scoured the land for weeks. But with every passing day, the noose tightened. The militia combed through forests, swamps, and nearby towns, employing every tactic they could to track him down. Every person in the area was either questioned or forced to help. And the pressure on Turner was mounting. On October 30th, 1831, Turner's hiding spot was betrayed by a man named Gray, an enslaved person who turned him in for a reward. Turner had been hiding in a pit, a small, concealed shelter deep in the woods, thinking he had escaped the worst. But in the end, it wasn't his own survival skills that failed him, it was the betrayal of someone he trusted. When the authorities closed in on Turner, they didn't find a man broken by fear. They found a determined, resolute figure, Knowing full well what his fate would be, Turner's capture marked the end of the immediate threat of the revolt. But it would also be the beginning of his place in history. It was no longer just about the rebellion, it was about what came next. Would Turner face a quick, quiet execution? Or would his trial spark even more fear and outrage? When Nat Turner was captured, the question wasn't just about what would happen to him. It was about how the system would use his trial as a tool to reinforce its power. Turner had become more than just a rebel. He had become a symbol of resistance, and the South needed to make sure no one would ever follow in his footsteps again. His trial would be a spectacle, one designed to crush any lingering hope for a slave rebellion and to send a message of fear to the entire enslaved population. Turner's trial began quickly. Just days after his capture, the trial was held in Jerusalem, Virginia, in a tense and hostile atmosphere. Turner, disheveled and shackled, stood before a court that had already made up its mind. The trial was not about justice, it was about reinforcing the idea that the system of slavery was untouchable. The proceedings were rushed, and there was little chance for Turner to defend himself. During the trial, Turner maintained his resolve. He didn't deny the charges. He didn't need to. He believed to the very end that he had been chosen by God to carry out the revolt, and he stood firm in his convictions. His calm demeanor in court only added to the aura of defiance surrounding him. Turner's lawyer, if you could call him that, didn't offer much in terms of defense. The outcome was already predetermined. Turner was convicted of murder and insurrection. On November 11th, 1831, Nat Turner was executed by hanging. But his death wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of his legacy. His execution became a public spectacle, a chilling reminder of what could happen to anyone who dared challenge the brutal system of slavery. What did Turner's death mean for the fight against slavery? How did his legacy shape the decades that followed? Nat Turner's execution did not silence his legacy. Far from it. In the years following his death, Turner became a symbol of rebellion, a figure both feared and admired. To the white South, he was the embodiment of everything they feared, a slave who had dared to rise up and challenge the very foundation of their society. His rebellion left an indelible mark on the South, and the message was clear. The enslaved people were capable of unimaginable resistance, but to many African Americans, Turner became a hero, a martyr who had stood up against the atrocities of slavery. His act of defiance would inspire generations to come, even though it would take decades for those dreams of freedom to be realized. The rebellion itself had been crushed, but its impact lived on in the hearts of those who longed for liberation. Turner's courage and unwavering belief in his mission were seen as a beacon of hope for the enslaved, a powerful reminder that resistance was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. In the wake of the revolt, the white South responded with even more violence and repression. Slave codes were tightened, and state and local governments took drastic steps to ensure that no such rebellion would ever occur again. Turner's revolt fueled a wave of fear that swept through the region, leading to even harsher laws, stricter control over the enslaved population, and brutal crackdowns on any form of resistance. In a twisted way, Turner's actions led to a deeper entrenchment of the system he sought to destroy, but Turner's legacy wasn't just one of fear and repression. His name would live on, inspiring the abolitionist movement and the fight for freedom. His story was woven into the fabric of the American struggle for liberty, and his spirit would not be forgotten. Are you ready to see how history would remember Nat Turner and the complex legacy he left behind? As the years passed, Nat Turner's story took on a life of its own, evolving into a symbol of resistance and defiance that echoed through American history. To some, he was a hero, a man who took a stand against the brutal system of slavery, no matter the personal cost. To others, especially in the South, he was a nightmare, a dangerous, violent figure whose rebellion shook their world to its core. And even today, Nat Turner remains a deeply polarizing figure. In the immediate aftermath of his execution, Turner's name was used to stoke fear. For decades, white Southerners would invoke his name to remind enslaved people of the terrible consequences of rebellion. The terror of his revolt was used as a tool of oppression, a way to keep enslaved populations in line. Yet, in the abolitionist circles of the North, Turner's act of defiance was seen as a symbol of resistance against tyranny. To them, Turner was not a villain, but a martyr, someone who had sacrificed everything in the fight for freedom. Turner's legacy also shaped the conversation about slavery in America. The revolt, though short-lived, brought national attention to the injustices of slavery and became a rallying point for those who were fighting to end it. The rebellion was a reminder that the enslaved were not passive victims. They were capable of rebellion, of taking their fate into their own hands. This, in turn, put pressure on the federal government to address the issue of slavery, which would eventually lead to the Civil War. Today, Nat Turner's legacy continues to spark debate. Some view him as a radical hero who did what was necessary to fight oppression, while others see his actions as an example of violence that went too far. Regardless of where you stand, one thing is clear: Nat Turner's story is woven into the very fabric of American history. His name will never be forgotten. And with that, we've uncovered the complex legacy of Nat Turner. What do you think? Was he a hero or a villain? Was he a hero or a villain?